right. So today's Believing Part 2, and the title is Build Our Believing Foundation. And do you feel that your life is a bit out of balance at times, a little off kilter? Do you feel like the weight of life slows you down? Has health or wealth that you've desired stayed just a little bit out of reach? Are your life goals, do they seem to be inching away or fading? And the answer to those questions is understood clearly by every successful person in the world. And the answer is so clearly explained step by step in Scripture that we should be able to easily understand it. And I ask you a question. If life's answers are so easy to find, why do they remain so elusive? It all starts at our core, our base, our compass needle, our foundation. And the foundation of our believing is tied to the formulation of our inner monologue. And I'm not necessarily talking about the foundation laid by your family, your teachers, your coaches, your friends. If believing was that easy, everybody would be an expert. Friends and family do play a big role in our life, but it's how we expand that foundation that really matters. If everything we have comes to us by believing, yet we don't have every single one of our needs met, there must be a problem. And any problem can be fixed. And to understand our believing blockade, let's begin at our base. So begin at the base. And the solution to most problems starts with a look at the foundation of our believing. And our internal dialogue is our foundation, our base. You know, what you tell yourself is what you are. See, believing is our canvas, and the paint and brushes are our inner talk. Your believing is your own masterpiece. And last week I talked, or a couple of weeks ago I talked about believing, and I just threw a lot of things out there, just a general view of it. Today we're going into one specific portion. And without this one, without this foundation, then no matter what you build on top of that, it'll never be straight. It'll never work right. And this is all about self-talk. Some people call it rumination. Some people call it self-examination, introspection. But it's that little voice inside of you that tells you that you're good or bad, doing right or wrong. I was recently in New York City, and I went to a bunch of parties while I was there. And I went to one party right in Tribeca, which is a financial district of Manhattan. And this apartment we went to wasn't very big, wasn't much bigger than the studio we're in right here, but the guy pays $10,000 a month rent, which I thought was a bit steep. But again, it's location, location, location. If you want to live in downtown Manhattan, you're going to pay. And as I was talking to this guy, I realized that he was once the manager for a singer named Shakira. And so he's been in the business, and he figured a way to even make more money. And as I was talking to this guy, I was looking around at the party, and in the party there was a guy I'd met, and he makes a living selling pot in Manhattan. And this guy was raised an orphan. There was a guy in that party who was an Olympic wrestler who used to train at the Olympic training facility here. There was filmmakers, a few of them. There was models, there was actors, there was actresses, there was musicians. And it was quite a diverse group. And there was there was me who's a Christian, there was Jewish filmmakers. One guy walked in with this Yankees ball cap on and this Yankees jacket and this big beard. And I asked Adam who that guy was, and he said he's a closet Hasidic Jew. And instead of wearing these hats and having his curls hanging down, he tucks it all under his hat and he goes to these highfalutin parties in Manhattan while his wife's staying at home. It's funny the different group. But I talked to this guy and I was asking him about money. And he said, Mark, there is a lot of people out there with a lot of money. And he said, they're going to give their money to somebody. Why not me? Why not you? He says, you got to find the niche. You got to find the loophole where you can go in and do a service for them that other people aren't performing. And he figured it out. You see, he built his financial foundation pretty big. His vision's pretty big for that. Another guy just barely is making it. That it was in that same party. So it's crazy. There was Muslim guys there was Jews, there was Christians, there was everybody there. And it's just funny looking around, and people are all different spots. Here's a quote. Models are some of the most insecure people I've ever met. They're constantly being told that they're not good enough. You've really got to practice loving yourself. End of quote. And that's by Miranda Kerr, a Victoria's Secret model from Australia. And see, we can study hundreds of self-help books. We can wear out inspirational DVDs. We can even addict ourselves to feel-good seminars or teachings and their teachers. But the effect is usually temporary. If we keep ending back up where we started a few days or hours after, then our foundation there's a problem with our foundation. I hope this is making sense. This is the very guttural basics. This is the core. This is a cellular point of believing. And if we can get this point, then we can begin to build from there and actually accomplish something in our life. Our believing foundation is in need of repair, not just a patch. See, what we silently say to ourselves is what we become. Sometimes we've said it so much we don't even recognize the voice anymore. Here's another quote. And this is by Michael Jordan, basketball great. If you're trying to achieve, there will be roadblocks. I've had them. Everybody has them. But obstacles don't have to stop you. If you run into a wall, don't turn around and give up. Figure out how to climb it, go through it, or work around it. End of quote. Every successful person understands this stuff. Most millionaires have lost $1 million. Then they go back and make $2 million. How big's your base? That's how big you build. Here's an important point. We're going to typically be challenged every time we begin to better ourselves. So I think to do it, push through it. Here's the lesson of the tower. I'm sure you've all heard of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? And soon after the construction of this tower in Tuscany, Italy, and soon after it began in 1173, it began to sink on one side. And it caused the beginning of that tower to lean when they just had one or they're beginning the second story on that thing. Yet they kept building on that faulty foundation. And incredibly, they built this huge 8-story tall, 16,000-ton structure on a tiny 10-foot deep foundation, which is set on top of very unstable soil between two rivers. They knew better. The Italians were incredible builders, yet they kept building on a faulty foundation. Even though they were expert craftsmen, they continued adding floor after floor to this tilted foundation for almost 200 years. From 1173 to 1372. They just kept building. 100 years after the construction began, one contractor actually tried to compensate and to straighten it out by making the next 4 floors with longer walls on the leaning side, thinking that he could straighten it back up. And all he did is make the tower curve a little bit. But it added such a great amount of weight that it tilted even more. Even knowing this, they still kept building. In 1838, almost 500 years after they completed this 8-story tower, to increase tourism, a local official ordered a trench to be dug around the entire base of the Tower of Pisa, so that all the tourists could come and see how great of a base, how beautiful the foundation was laid, the stonework. And so they did this. They dug this around this already weakened and small foundation to show off its detail. The crew hit water. The trench filled up with water like a moat, and it tilted even more. See, now they're trying to patch the foundation. Henry Ford said most people spend more time and energy going around a problem than they do in trying to solve them. In 1934, 100 years after that last fiasco, a guy named Benito Mussolini tried his hand at fixing the tower. And he thought the Leaning Tower was an embarrassment to Italy. And he wanted to set it up perpendicular once and for all. And so he hired his best guys and engineers and everything to figure it out. And they drilled 361 holes in the base of this. And they pumped 90 tons of concrete into it. And all it did when it hardened, it added more weight as a counterweight, and it leaned even more. In World War II, the Germans used the Tower of Pisa as an observation deck. And the Americans thought about destroying it because they could see for a long way from this, but because of its historical value, they didn't. So, but in 1964, the government of Italy attached 800 tons of lead to the high side, which did little more than make it ugly. 800 tons of lead. And between 1990 and 2008, excavators removed 100 tons of soil from the high side to stabilize the foundation, but this time it worked. This time it worked. And the Leaning Tower has stopped its leisurely collapse for the first time in history, because it was constantly moving to the point it would have collapsed. And the engineers say that this last fix will last for 200 years. So the Tower of Pisa has been an 800-year construction project, but Italy will never again try to completely straighten the Leaning Tower of Pisa. They're just trying to keep it from collapsing. And I think that's how people's lives are. After a while, you just try to keep it from collapsing. Because it's hard to build a foundation. It's hard to repair a foundation that's already been there. See, even though they kept working for 8 centuries, they were never successful at correcting that foundation. And today they have no intention of straightening that tower. After all, it brings in 60 million visitors to the town of Pisa every year. And that's a lot of euros that come in. So to the world and to Italy, it's good enough. We'll accept it as it is. Is your life good enough? To what standard, to what blueprint have you built yourself? You know, we can each only believe as high as our foundation will allow us to build. That's it. So if you keep trying and it doesn't work, it doesn't stick, it's your foundation, folks. And your foundation is your self-talk. That little voice in your head that just keeps chattering at you. Kevin Bacon, an actor, said, "I don't read criticism of my stuff, only because when it's bad, it's rough. And when it's good, it's not good enough." But it shows a high opinion of oneself. You can't be an actor at his level without having a high opinion of your ability. You can't be a success in anything in life without a high opinion of your own personal ability. Self-talk. Begin at your the base of your believing. Fix your foundation by by fixing your self-talk. Like Henry Ford said, the man who thinks he can and the man who thinks he can't are both right. Which are you? End of quote. Imagine just building a car. Be one of the first ones ever to do it. Or engineering an assembly line. I mean, what he did, it's incredible what Henry Ford did. But it all starts here. He saw it, which we'll get to quite graphically in a few minutes. See, what do you think of yourself? That is your base. That's as big as your foundation is. And you can build no higher than your base believing will allow. See, improper self-talk over an extended period of time hinders us from straightening out our own believing. See, the moment we say to ourselves, "I'm satisfied, this is as good as it gets," that's the moment we stop believing. Now, I know this is simple, and we all understand this, but we just got to start doing it. But it's every thought, like that one verse, lead every thought captive. That's what this is talking about. It's every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Here's one. See if you can guess who quoted this. Trying to tear down the past prohibits you from building up your future. Lil Wayne, American rapper. I mean, that's a pretty heavy comment for Lil Wayne. Trying to tear down the past prohibits you from building up your future. Which way are you looking? You driving, looking in the rearview mirror? Or you look out the windshield? It's your choice. See, believing is the foundation to everything we've ever received or achieved. Self-talk is the foundation of our believing. All successful people understand this. Here's a quote. "Hell, there are no rules here. We're trying to accomplish something." Thomas Edison. I mean, what is it, 10,000 tries to do a light bulb? That's a lot of failures. That's a very low percentage rate, yet we've all enjoyed it our whole life. The incandescent bulb, which is going out of fashion. And go ahead and turn here to Luke. And we're going to read Luke 6, 47 through 49 from the Message. And this is just to explain this. This isn't going to be the main text. There's no rules here, folks. Who set the rules for you? Who told you who you were? And why did we believe it? These words, verse 47, I speak to you, are not mere additions to your life, homeowner improvements to your standard of living. They are foundation words, words to build a life on. If you work the words into your life, you're like a smart carpenter who dug deep and laid the foundation of his house on bedrock. When the river burst its banks and crashed against the house, nothing could shake it. It was built to last. But if you use my words in Bible studies and don't work them into your life, You're like a dumb carpenter who built a house but skipped the foundation. And when the swollen river came crashing in, it collapsed like a house of cards. It was a total loss. You know, I've seen houses washed away by a flash flood last year. You know, these houses had stood for decades. You had a little bit of raging water, boom, pushed them right off their foundations. See, build a strong foundation with quality materials, quality self-talk. This will literally be the hardest thing you'll ever have to do, because we are so used to being us. You have to become a different you. You really do. It's every thought. It's controlling it. Every time you feel poorly about yourself, you change it. Every single time. Every time you think you can't, I can. Every time you think, I'm not able, I am able. I can do. I mean, look at the word, how much in the Bible is set up so we can think highly of ourselves. It's all to set our self-talk. Every bit of it. Jimmy Connors, a tennis champion, once said, I can't go win Wimbledon anymore. So if what I've done in the past is not good enough, let it go. Because I'm certainly not sitting around thinking about it. Champion. Don't hang on to the negatives or your critics. There'll always be critics. Don't sit around and ruminate over lack or failures. Let's build that inner vocabulary like a champion. What you train yourself to say internally is what you will see externally. And now we're going to look at the continuing record from a few weeks ago titled Identity Theft. And this is just a few days after that. Jesus and his band of merry men were north of Galilee in a lovely area called Caesarea Philippi. And he had taken 3 of his most trusted followers up to a high mountain, probably the snow-capped Mount Hermon, which could be seen from where they were staying in Caesarea Philippi. And Mark 9, 1 through 12 talks of this outing, which we will not cover today. And we call it the Transfiguration, or the Mount of Transfiguration. And on the way back, they'd come down the mountain. They'd just seen amazing stuff. Jesus talks about his impending death. And it was bothering the 3 guys he was walking with. And as they're coming back and they're approaching the main body of believers, the crowd was big, much bigger than he had left. And he came back to the people he had left behind, and he noticed trouble. Go to Mark chapter 9, verse 14. You will like this. So just think, being away and seeing Jesus transfigured, glowing, hearing the voice of God, these 3 guys did along with Jesus. I mean, all night Jesus was awake. So this is his 3rd day now of being awake and alert. And Mark 9:14, and when he came to his disciples, he saw a great multitude about them, and the scribes questioning with them. See, these religious guys just couldn't get enough of arguing with Jesus' disciples. See, religious people hate truly free people because they can't be controlled. Religion's all about control. Legalism's all about control. And remember, the scribes were the ones who interpreted the law. They didn't write the law. And they thought very highly of their own intellect. They thought very highly of their ability to debate. Think of a lawyer or a judge. They're expert arguers. Don't they call it arguing law? That's what these guys were. They argued biblical law. And they liked to challenge people who thought any different than they did. Remember, smart people always think they're right. In fact, the Bible says every man thinks he's right. So keep arguing. And verse 15, and straightway all the people, when they beheld him, when they saw him, were greatly amazed, and running to him saluted him. Now that doesn't mean a lot to us, but when people realized that Jesus was heading their way, they ran up to him and hugged him. That's what salute means, to embrace. You leave for a day and things go nuts. Maybe you've been on a job, you've been a boss, you go away for a day or two, come back, it's like, what happened? He came back, the lawyers are sitting there, railing on the guys. Everybody runs up to him, Jesus! And they're hugging him, wanting to touch him, shaking his hand, patting him on the back. He's thinking, here we go. Welcome home. And so Jesus showed up at just the right time. And see, the people who really respected him are the ones who ran up and gave him a big hug. And this is going to be important later. Verse 16, and he asked the scribes, so who's he talking to? The scribes. What question ye with them? Why are you talking to my people? See, the legalistic scribes didn't have time to answer this question, which is also very important. The father of a very sick boy spoke first. He wasn't even the one Jesus was talking to. And look what this dad says with one breath of the heart. Verse 17, and one of the multitude answered and said, Master, I brought unto thee my son, which hath a dumb spirit. And wheresoever he taketh him, he teareth him, and he foameth, and gnasheth with his teeth, and he pineth away. And I spake to the disciples that they should cast him out, and they couldn't. They could not. See, this father probably told all the disciples the same sad story. He probably told everybody the same sad story, and he'd never got deliverance. He said, I thought you were in town, and I brought my son, hoping you could heal him. He can't talk. He's out of control. He beats himself. He cuts himself. He grinds his teeth, and he foams at the mouth. He refuses to eat, and he's getting skinnier and skinnier and more frail. I think he's going to die. I believe it's a devil spirit that drives him, so I came here for help. But your men didn't have the power to solve this problem, Jesus. Now, Jesus is going to talk directly to the Father, but the lesson is intended for everybody within earshot. Jesus is going to now dig to the base of that man's believing foundation and see what's really there. Because what people say to you, especially in a counseling situation, is usually just one little layer. People seldom expose themselves fully. Verse 19, he answered him and saith, O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you, and how long shall I suffer you? See, O faithless generation simply means that the community believing had fallen to a new low. Sort of reminds me of Live by Believing Part 1 a couple of weeks ago. And like Mark 6:6, where it says he marveled because of their unbelief. He was like, just couldn't believe that they couldn't believe. It amazed Jesus that people had such unstable believing, such an unstable foundation. Like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Big building, small pad. Not smart. And that's why we don't have all our need met. Because we haven't built that foundation via self-talk. We haven't painted our masterpiece. We might have just drawn an outline. People are trained to lie to themselves, which makes them very good at lying to you. All men are liars. I think about my two friends, which I've told you many times. Both of them were told by their families that every male in their family dies before they're 55. And both of them, who knew better, who knew a lot of the word, they both died before their 55th birthday. It's crazy. If you can believe for the year of your death, you can believe for the year of your deliverance. She says their foundation was death before 55. What's your foundation? Health? Prosperity? Relationships? Verse 20, and they brought unto him unto him. And when he saw him, straightway the Spirit tear him, and he fell on the ground, wallowed, foaming. See, it took a group of people to bring this writhing, crazy, out of control child to where Jesus was. And the moment the kid saw Jesus, he jerked violently and threw himself on the ground and began to roll around, spitting and foaming, just boom, 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 just going crazy on the ground. You've seen kids throw tizzies, but just multiply that. There's more than a tizzy. See, Jesus needed more information in order to help this kid, because what he saw wasn't really what that dad said earlier. He needed a clearer picture of where the dad's believing was at. Verse 21, and he asked the father. So if you don't know something, what's a good thing to do? Ask a question. And the answer will determine if this child will get healed or not get healed. How many people go to counselors but never tell them what's really going on? Most. So they go for years. Sometimes a whole life, because they won't get honest. Or friends. Doesn't have to be a counselor. Or parents talking to a child sometimes. Adult children can be great at times. So he asked the father, how long is it ago since this came unto him? Simple question. And he said, of a child. So this kid's acted like this since he was little. And oftentimes, it cast him into the fire. Now we're getting more information here. And into the waters to destroy him, which means what kind of spirit had to be in there in addition? Suicide. But if thou canst do anything, have compassion on us and help us. See, the Father finally adds the necessary information. He gives Jesus a more complete verbal visual than the apostles probably asked for. See, remember, people rarely share the dark details of their life until they're fully ready to be helped and they fully trust you. And when they expose their foundation, they expose their believing. It's a very vulnerable spot. You've told some people things more than you wish you had of at times, and they use it against you. Happens. But that's the point where people can be helped. It's a very vulnerable spot. You dig down to the foundation of any building, all around it, you've just compromised that foundation. It's exposed. It's like being naked, emotionally, spiritually. Back in verse 18, the Father, and you can look up the words on your own, he told the disciples that they were going to heal his son. There's a difference. in the tone. He told them that they were going to heal his son, but now he's asking Jesus for help. So now there's a change. It's an attitude change. The Father just added some depth to his foundation at this point. And Jesus is coaching him along with words. It doesn't take that long. It doesn't take years and years. It's just a few words, a few thoughts can change your entire life if you believe them. See, the scribes are keeping their mouths shut, which is amazing. And I bet they were enjoying that exchange because they were men of words. The flip of words, the redirection of thought. They were loving this. It must have been fun to watch Jesus in action. Imagine. Now remember, he was up, this is his third day of being awake. Okay, now they walked up this mountain and then they walked back down this mountain. And then they had to walk all the way to where all these people are. They come run up to him, grab him, this and that. And then this father sort of jumps him when he was really confronting the scribes. And Jesus said unto him, if thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. And what a lesson. What a lesson. Moments before, the man asked Jesus if he could picture himself having the energy and compassion to help his vexed child. It's basically what he said. Jesus asked the man if he could clearly picture his son delivered. He asked Jesus, do you see it? Can you see yourself big enough to help my child? Your disciples couldn't. Jesus says, can you see your child delivered? That's the essence of believing, folks. See, believing is our inner masterpiece. It's the painting you work on your whole life. Believing is the completed painting of what we expect to see. Our self-talk is the paint and brushes. You're the artist of your own life. You're the builder of your believing. Verse 24, and straightway the father of the child cried out and said with tears. Now, you don't just pop out tears unless you're a heck of an actor or there's some deep, you just hit a deep root of emotion. Now, I don't know what it's like to have a child that's been sick and crazy and suicidal and hurting themselves and diving into the fires. There was fires everywhere in those day and time. Water. This is not far from, this is where there's a lot of water. It's all swamps and fountains and rivers that all feed into the Jordan River. There's water everywhere. There's fires everywhere because people cooked. And so this dad had to watch this kid 24 hours a day. Think your life is hard? How would that wear you out? You ever known a parent who had a child who was handicapped? It's everything. It changes their whole life. But they dedicate their lives to that child. And straightway the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. See, Jesus reached the base of this man's foundation and went to work. And the father finally understood what he had to do. For the second time he asked for help, but this time he could see it. He could visualize it. He could once again visualize his son's complete deliverance. He pulled back out the beautiful picture that he had buried long ago deep in his heart of what he wanted his child to be and have. That he had painted probably for his child, even though his child had been vexed. This guy must have been amazing, this dad. To have a picture of something you've never seen. Believing. Believing. He saw his son delivered. He'd painted the picture in his heart. It was his masterpiece, his love. See, pull back out that beautiful picture of yourself that you once proudly displayed to yourself. You painted it. You've worked on your painting your entire life. The cool thing about art and love is that you can improve on both. My grandma was a painter, and she'd have a painting up for sometimes years, and you'd see every once in a while just, and she wouldn't go back to it for a couple of months. Then it'd be, then she'd paint a little bit more, and it took years sometimes for one painting. It's a masterpiece. It's your whole life. What you paint is what you're going to see. The foundation that you build is as big as you can build, or it just starts leaning. See, when Jesus, verse 25, saw the people came running together, now there's more people that have heard of the commotion. Now they're running together. He rebuked the foul spirit. Now he had to get to work quick now. And this is going to be some big lessons here in a second. He rebuked the foul spirit, saying unto him, Thou dumb and deaf spirit, I charge thee, come out of him and enter no more into him. For him to be able to say that means he knew the Father was going to believe from that point on. Spirits only enter via believing. Somebody has to want what that thing's doing, or it can't get in. Sort of weird. It's just the way it is. And the spirit cried and rent him sore and came out of him. And he was as one dead, insomuch that many said, He's dead. See, when Jesus saw even more people begin to run up so they could see what was happening, the gawkers, he knew the temperature of believing would change. And these were not the ones who greeted him with hugs earlier. These were the second-tier disciples, or just curiosity seekers. Jesus knew that the dad's foundation of believing was now fully formed for this child, and he had this moment to deal with it, to help. Because what if these people, when more and more come and that dad starts looking around, he may lose that vision. Does that make sense? See, the picture was complete in that man's heart. He then evicted the spirit, and the child flipped around wildly on the ground until he was scraped, bruised, and bloodied. And then he just stopped and lay there motionless. And the group that showed up last, they burst through the crowd and they pointed and they said, He's dead! You killed him, Jesus! What would the Father think then? What would the disciples who were hanging around think? What had to go through Jesus' mind? He just said that. The kid did all the stuff, and they just laying there. Drool and spittle, foam pouring out of his mouth. Not a pretty sight. Blood, bruises all over this kid, burn marks. Not a good-looking kid. But beautiful to the dad. Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. See, look at the multiple layers of believing action required just to heal this one boy. See, our life is a canvas covered with layers of colorful strokes. Our believing is like setting the foundation for a large building. But will it be large enough to hold everything we want? It's up to us. The answer is yes, it can be. But if people tell you your foundation's this big, and you want a huge building on it, and not a mousetrap, then it ain't going to work. Overbuild your foundation. Prepare yourself for abundance. It starts with self-talk. Every thought, every word, everything that happens inside your head. And I'm going to give you some tips here in a minute. And now here we go. Verse 28, and when he was coming to the house, so they must have been outside, heading toward a house now. They came into a house. His disciples asked him privately, why could we not cast him out? Good question. Hadn't they cast out spirits before? Yeah, it says that. When the 70 were sent out and all that, they did. Why not now? What was different? On a side note, I love how the disciples were shocked when they were unable to heal that child. And that shows some heart and vision too. Because they're like, wow, how come we couldn't do it? I don't get it. You ever gone to a professional and you're trying to fix something, you can't, and they go boom, 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 and it's done. It's like, how did you do that? Well, they're a professional. Or an artist. The guys who do those characters, they're like boop, 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 and it looks like sort of a cartoonish, but it looks sort of like you. You can tell it's you. How do they do that? I can't do it. I draw a stick figure. Just a round head and a stick body and two little arms, I'm not an artist. So but yeah, you have to be the artist of your own life. So, but I loved how they were shocked. And this time they only saw part of the picture, a glimpse of the believing foundation of the Father. You see, they also failed to grasp, these apostles, the great momentum of group unbelief. They didn't really get it yet. Matthew 13:58 says, and he did many mighty works because of their unbelief. See, what other people say to you does affect the level of your believing. Think you might want to choose your friends well? Sadly, you can't choose your family. And if your family's negative or says hurtful things, then you just have to be choosy with the words that you allow to go onto the canvas of your heart. Not easy to do. You control your colors. You control the brush. Nobody else does. Self-image sets the boundaries of individual accomplishment, quote and unquote. That's by Maxwell Maltz. Self-image sets the boundaries of individual accomplishment. See, you paint your own self-portrait. I love the self-portrait that probably all of us have seen of Norman Rockwell that he did of himself. And his painting that he was painted of himself, you see him looking in a mirror. He painted himself looking in a mirror and what he looked like looking at himself. And then the picture that he's painting of himself in the painting is far better than what he even sees in the mirror. That's how it should be for us. We should look better to ourselves than we even are. It's like I've said before, I had a professional portrait taken one time and for some social media. And when I got it back, the picture looked exactly like me, only better. Looked just like me, but better. That's when we sent out on the cards. But that's how your life should be. You should be exactly like you, but better in your heart. And verse 29, and he said unto them, this kind can come forth by nothing but by prayer and fasting. And I think, wow. And this is the complete solution to rumination, to improper self-talk, to a shallow foundation, to a messy portrait. The answer is prayer and fasting. See, prayer Prayer is self-talk. Prayer is self-talk. That's all it is. God already knows what you need, doesn't he? If he knows everything. But he asks you to ask. Why? Because it resets your believing. Where it says in the Bible that Jesus went out in the morning, early to pray, it's because he just reset it. He reset it. He reset it. He reset that believing every single day. Prayer is self-talk at its best because you usually tie it into something you think God can help you with. It's powerful stuff, folks. Nothing happens without believing. Now, fasting, according to Isaiah, is putting the positive believing that's in your heart out into the streets, into the world. Prayer and fasting is living your life in full color for everyone to enjoy. It's more than just for you, your life. You're a gift to this earth, folks. You're a gift. There wasn't one person I couldn't communicate with at all those 5 parties that I went to. From very rich to Jew to Islamic guys, it didn't matter. People will respond to truth. Here's a quote. Relentless, repetitive self-talk is what changes our self-image. Dennis Waitley. Relentless, repetitive self-talk is what changes our self-image. Everybody understands this. Now I'm going to tell you 2 points on how to reduce rumination or improper self-talk. And this is from Susan Nolan Hokesma, who's a PhD and psychologist and professor at the Yale University. And they're basically 2 steps to stop or minimize rumination. And these go along with what Jesus said in verse 29. Number 1, engage in activities that foster positive thoughts. And 2, problem solve. That's it. This is a psychologist. And this is some of man's biggest problems. This takes them from the depth of despair to the heights of ecstasy. But number 1, engage in activities that foster positive thoughts. She said, you need to engage in activities that can fill your mind with other thoughts, preferably positive thoughts. End of quote. Every psychologist knows that. We know it. Yet we keep putting ourselves down. Or we think lowly, or we think it's good enough. It's okay. We'll leave it this way for another 200 years. Oh man. See, get your mind off the negative you by putting them on something positive. And that can be prayer, a recreation, a hobby, a sport, a physical activity, or even going to work sometimes. Whatever it takes to get your mind out of the bummer room. Get out of there. And the second thing, problem solve. Nolan Hoeksema said, people who ruminate not only replay situations in their head, they also focus on abstract questions such as, why do these things happen to me? And what's wrong with me that I can't cope? End of quote. In essence, do something positive to help your situation. Solve your own problems like you do for other people. You could look at me and go, man, if he would just do this, and if he'd teach this way and just do this, he'd really be good. We all can look at each other and say all these things, how your life could be better, but do it to yourself. Problem solve. You do it at work. You do it for other people. Do it for yourself. Those are the 2 things. solve your own problems. See, prayer and fasting is a sturdy foundation of clearly articulated believing combined with service to humanity. Let me say that again. Prayer and fasting is a sturdy foundation of clearly articulated believing combined with service to humanity. It's all about service, folks. Usually when you get out of your own little bummer room and you help somebody get out of theirs, or that's how you get out of your own bummer room, is you help somebody else get out of theirs so many times. Help somebody else. If you don't know what to do, go serve food to the homeless. Do something. Help a Boy Scout troop, Girl Scout troop. Do something. Speak the word. That's always good. Do something. See, while the Father and the disciples clearly saw the child's problem, Jesus clearly saw that he was the solution. If you look at the problems, all you're going to find is problems. If you look for solutions, you begin to start seeing more and more and more solutions. It's a retraining of the heart, folks. You are the solution. You're the solution. Can you see it? See, focus on your desired deliverance, not on the lack. You get what you focus on. You can only build as high as your foundation. See, remember the lesson of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. We can only build a life as tall as our foundation will allow us to build. As we build our believing foundation, we will grow to heights most Christians only read about. God bless.